This is WCPS One-on-One on the Washington County Public Schools YouTube channel. I'm Will Kaufman with the Public Information Office, joined by Chad Criswell, Senior Project Manager and Planning Supervisor with our Facilities Planning and Development Office. Chad, welcome. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
You were part of a presentation to the Board of Education recently to talk about enrollment numbers. And it's not as simple as just delivering numbers. It's a big, broad subject. How do the numbers look countywide?
Well, I think that before we look at the numbers, the important thing to remember about enrollment is it changes every day. Every day we have people move out of a system, move into schools, move out of schools. When we present and review the enrollment as we do every year, we're looking at a snapshot in time. So the state looks at September 30th as the official enrollment date, and that's when they take their annual snapshot of every school system in the state. So those were the numbers that we were presenting. We were actually presenting enrollment that we saw back in September, on September 30th, and comparing it to the prior year's September 30th enrollment. So it is important to remember that we present one number in September. It's not the enrollment number we'll see all throughout the year. We will go up by a couple hundred students. We may go down by a couple hundred students at different points through the year, but this is the snapshot that we kind of gauge everything. And most importantly, this is the snapshot in which the state determines its funding.
What's the breakdown, the elementary, middle, high over the county?
Over the county. So this year we saw an increase in our K through 5 grade level. We went up by about 88 students. We were actually not projecting to be up. We were projecting to go down by maybe about 30 K through 5 students, and we ended up being up by 88. So that was a little bit of a surprise to us. That surprise came really in 3 different areas. We saw a few more kindergartners this year than what we had anticipated. And we saw a few more students migrate in. Don't picture them with little knapsacks and sticks, but people actually moved into the area. New students come into school. They may have come from private schools. It could have been for a number of different reasons. But we saw new students come into second and third grade above where we had expected to be. So that was part of the reason we saw that increase in the elementary enrollment. Our middle school enrollment, we saw it go down by about 17 students. So with a student population of about 5,060 students, up or down 17 students is pretty flat. And then in our high school, we saw an increase of about 106 students. And both the middle and the high schools were pretty much right on where we had projected to be. We were anticipating that. Obviously, every year we look at the grade levels. So for high school, we look at the leaving senior class. We look at the incoming 8th grade class, and we base our projections off of those numbers. And that's how we determine and project whether that high school is going to go up or the middle school is going to go up. And that's where we base those projections. But overall, in our K through 12 grades, we saw an increase of about 177 students. Now, one of the things I didn't talk about was our pre-K programs, and we expanded some of our pre-K services this year. There's some new services being offered at some schools that weren't offered before. Funkstown switched over to become an all pre-K facility. We are now providing more pre-K services to students compared from this year to last September 30th. So this year we're offering services to 644 pre-K students, and that's about 65 more pre-K students than we were able to provide services for last year.
What, in my terms, without all of the science that goes behind it and the work and the research and all the homework that you and yours do in your department, those numbers seem almost negligible. Is that a safe characterization where it doesn't feel, those numbers don't feel dramatic in the ups and downs?
That's absolutely correct. So for the past 2 years, we saw our overall enrollment decrease by 50 students and 100 students, and this year we saw it go up by 177 K through 12 students. I term it as flat. When you have 22,000 students overall, 100 here or 100 there is really not a big difference. It's a good sign. It means we have a very stable economy in the economy where we don't see floods of people leaving. Obviously, it's good not to see floods of people coming in either, because that can create its own problems. But yeah, basically we're running pretty flat, which is a lot better than I've seen some other counties. There's some other counties that have some serious declining enrollments, and that creates other issues. And luckily we seem to be holding pretty steady. And I always say before, you've got to be steady before you can increase, or before you can start to see things go up.
What are some of the things that go? What are some of the main things that go into making predictions on enrollment? Some of the factors that you consider.
Well, we'll actually start doing our enrollment projections here probably early December. We'll start really diving into the numbers. Obviously, we don't look at just the September enrollment. We'll look at the latest enrollment in December. I'll work with a consultant. We go out and we talk to the school communities. We check the, I guess you could call it the temperature of each community. Principals might say, hey, I've been hearing about this, or I'm seeing a lot of this situation. We take all that into account. We go out and we look at a lot of the developments in the community. We look to see where they're getting close to finishing construction on certain homes or apartments, because obviously if they're going to be sold, there's a chance we're going to be generating students from those various developments. We also look at the birth rates from 5 years ago. So when I said we were surprised a little bit by this year's kindergarten being up a little, it was based on us looking at birth rates from 5 years ago. And we have a certain factor that we'll use, and it typically ranges between 0.89 to 1.01 is the number of students that we'll see come in based on the prior year, 5 year ago birth. So for example, 5 years ago, if there were 1,000 births in the county, we would expect to see between 900 to 1,010 kindergartners 5 years ago. So that's how we base it. There's a little bit of guess to, especially the kindergarten, but there is some theory behind it, and there is an approach. From grade to grades, we typically see a certain in-migration. Typically, we'll see more people come in from out of county between the 5th and 6th grade region, and then we'll see our biggest jump always is in 9th grade. We always see a big jump from the 8th grade class up to the 9th grade, and we follow those trends. We adjust them as necessary, and that's really the basics of what we do to figure out enrollment. However, there's a lot of things that come into play. There's a lot of factors that you can't account for. You'll have special permissions. You'll have magnet programs. You'll have, just all types of certain situations that will cause the enrollment to adjust. And there's oddities as well. We look at the births, but we have no way to know whether, of those 1,000 births, if 50% of them occurred in Smithsburg, or if they were in the city of Hagerstown. We don't have the ability to know that, and it really doesn't matter because people move around. Right. Just because I said 900 out of that 1,000 may have shown up, that doesn't mean that's the exact same 900 students. They may have left the county, new ones may have come in. It's just a trend ratio that we follow. Right.
We undertook a redistricting. It was based on a number of factors. The new Jonathan Hager School came online. 2 other schools closed. There was a bigger picture in all of that. How do you feel about how the numbers worked out in the context of a shift in school boundary lines?
Well, I think that's a tough question actually, because if you say, well, was redistricting successful? Well, it depends on who you ask.
Right.
Certain members might say, no, I'm not happy I had to move. I would have much rather stayed at this school. Or others are like, yeah, this is great. We've got a smaller class size now. So I'm always careful not to say it was successful, but the numbers right now, this first year, appear to be doing the intention of what that whole proposal was to do. We did see the enrollment go up at Clear Spring Elementary a little bit. Of course, as Conococheague Elementary closed this year, a few students went to there. We saw the enrollment go up at Fountain Rock Elementary, which they had been at pretty low enrollment, and underutilizing that facility. So we were able to move some students. Their enrollment is now up. It's created a little bit of enrollment relief at Williamsport Elementary. Williamsport Elementary, actually, we were able to add a pre-K program at that school that we did not have before. So that created a little bit of space there for that, and that was a good thing. Jonathan Hager, of course, is the new school that just opened, and it opened right about where we had projected, but we put a pre-K program there as well. So that was also, again, we're able to provide more services and balance the enrollment out. We were able to relieve enrollment pressures we had seen at Lincolnshire Elementary, so we saw their enrollment come down. That was definitely a benefit that we're seeing in the enrollment this year. Pangbourne Elementary would be another one. They had some extremely high enrollments. We took a fair number of students out of that attendance zone and sent some to Old Forge, another elementary facility that was had pretty low enrollments. So we brought their enrollment up. We brought Pangbourne's enrollment down, and we were also able to increase the pre-K programs at Pangbourne to offer more services there. Again, another advantage. The Potomac Heights, they had seen a decline in enrollment here in recent years, and we were able to take some of those students from Pangbourne right over to Potomac Heights, and that was also a benefit to both facilities. So, yeah, we have seen, so far it looks like it's successful, but it's and again, I say that term very carefully, successful, but from a numbers standpoint, it seems like it's working. We'll really be able to tell more here over the next 2 years, I'd say, because obviously this year, anyone that was impacted by redistricting had the option to stay at their school they had previously been if they were a fifth grader, or if they were a sibling of a fifth grader, they could get a special permission to stay at that school. So not all the numbers moved around and really finalized out. And to be honest, every year enrollment changes. So to say next year, well, it looks like this worked or this didn't work, it might not be accurate because there could be other factors that have caused a change in that particular attendance boundary. A new development came online. Something got renovated and more people are now staying there. There's certain things that can happen that can throw it out the window, and that's why we look at enrollment every year. That's why we make adjustments all the time, because it's not something you can set boundaries and it'll last for 100 years. It's fluid. There's going to be different areas that see growth. There's going to be different areas that are popular this year that have young families come into, and for the next 18 years we'll see a lot of students come out of, where there's other communities in Washington County where it's a little bit of an older generation that reside there and have lived there for the past 30 or 40 years, and they really only have grandkids that come to that area. So until those properties change hands, we won't see students from there for a while. So it's a little tricky.
You're updating and analyzing numbers constantly. That part of it is never over. How do you balance short-term, long-term, what the numbers mean, short-term, long-term, not only in-house in your department, but for everybody else who's got some kind of a stake in what these numbers mean? Tell me what the numbers mean, short-term, long-term.
So short-term projections, we normally like to see them come in pretty close. Long-term projections are our best guess and are subject to changes every year. We always caution that. The short-term enrollment, we think we can normally get pretty close. We certainly try. The kindergarten's a little tough, but, we had been projecting a little bit of slow growth in Washington County for the next 10 years. This year, the fact that we went up a little bit, by those 100 and couple students, 177 students, we expect that would increase our growth as it goes out in time. It's something we'll look at, obviously, as certain grade levels go through. We've got several large elementary grades that we expect to go through the middle and high school ranks. And, we have been thinking that we're going to have to watch our high school enrollment here in the next several years, because there's a strong likelihood that if all those students migrate through, we could see the high school enrollment go up by a couple of hundred, and space could start to really become a concern at some of our high schools. So it's something we're watching. Obviously, things change. New companies can come in, companies can leave, people come in. There's so many factors. So we do analyze the numbers a lot of ways. We look at the data. We try to glean as much information as we can to help prepare for staffing, so that way we can determine whether teachers need to go from one school to another school to help with various class sizes. But it is really not an exact science, and short of being given dictatorship control over every one in the county and say you're not allowed to move in or you're not allowed to move out, we're just always going to be subject to those fine-tuning adjustments, and our goal is just to try to keep them as fine-tuning adjustments.
If that's ever the case, you and I are going to have a completely different discussion in here someday.
That would definitely be interesting. interesting, but it is the truth. It
Right.
really is. It's there's so many things that you can't control, and we certainly do our best. We use every mathematical analysis that we can think of to try to get our percentage of accuracy up. But the reality of it is if someone in the community loses a job, or if someone gets a job somewhere else, or decides to leave to go be home with their parents or to a different area, that's just going to happen, and that's going to have an impact on the schools.
This is not unlike budgeting in this particular role that you have, where it's almost a 12-month-a-year proposition. You can't, once you finalize a budget, button it up, get it approved, you get a day and a half to take a break, and then you're right back at it. It's kind of like the same thing with the numbers.
Absolutely, and you almost have to be, because we want to do our best to keep an eye on everything, so you need to be aware of it, and you have to be fluid. Like I said, to go with I think we can leave this or not pay attention to this for every year. You can't do that, because there will be bubbles that come through. So you just need to be prepared for it.
Well, take your day and a half off, and then we'll get back at it. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it. Chad Criswell is Senior Project Manager and Planning Supervisor with the Facilities Planning and Development Office. This is WCPS One-on-One, found on the Washington County Public Schools